This is Spoken Sins, where if you give us 15 minutes, we'll show you a creator's soul. I am Rob Anderson, the voice of Written Sins. And today we have with us
Jay Serrano. I'm the writer of Comedic Divinity, Fateless, and currently working on a couple other projects, especially the sequel to Fateless.
So now you wanted to come on the program today to talk about pretty much how creators sometimes get bullied to actually change their concepts to be more marketable. Could you walk us through your experiences with that so far?
Yeah, Rob. Basically, one of the biggest ones I've noticed is when I was originally writing my book, when I first started shopping it around or getting just general opinions from people in the industry. A lot of them had a lot of concern because I don't have a. This is strange, but they were very concerned because none of my characters were homosexual or bisexual, and it wasn't because I was trying to avoid it. It wasn't because I was trying to include it. The characters just didn't feel that way to me at the time, so I never bothered writing it that way. They would constantly say, well, you have to have them or else you're going to lose that demographic. But truthfully, it was kind of one of those things where if I changed my story to fit that, I felt like it wouldn't feel as genuine. It would feel like I was trying to pander, like I was trying to cater to a demographic that, in all honesty, I'm trying to cater to readers. And I think a reader, regardless of their own personal lives, their own personal experiences, they want to hear a story. And that story shouldn't necessarily just be a story about their interests or their likes, but somewhere where they could, read about something that really takes them, through an adventure that it maybe takes them away from their own lives more.
That makes sense. As a writer myself, obviously, I completely understand what you're saying, and I've had problems with names and people, doubting a name, and it sometimes it gets in your head. Like you suddenly take a moment and wonder, are they right? Did you have any of those moments where you're like, oh my God, did I make a mistake? Did you ask a couple people to read it just to give their opinion to you?
Yeah, when I was reading a lot of the or when I was originally, shopping my story around to other people, kind of trying to get my beta readers and everything involved, I noticed that one of the hardest things to classify was when they started saying, well, I remember sitting there trying to think about it, and I remember something that Neil Gaiman had said is that he wrote a book for a reader, not for an age or a demographic. And so it was hard because I wanted to explain that to people that, I think a 9-year-old could read my book and get something out of it. They're going to miss a vast majority of it because it was geared higher. But I think that they would enjoy some of the characters, some of the interactions. But I also think that, a 60-year-old retiree or, a truck driver or something like that would be able to enjoy it just as well. And maybe they get a different side of the story. Because a lot of them, for the most part, gave me, if you ask friends of yours or family or things like that, you're going to get the constant, oh, it's really great, and you get that so much, you really don't get to grow as a writer. And so I really kind of wanted to look more along the lines of, okay, what is it missing? I don't care how good it is. I want to know what it is that you feel doesn't connect or doesn't work. And so when I went through that, I ran into that a lot with, especially during my rewrites, is realizing that to tell where I would lose people or where they were losing interest based on how much they avoided that part of the conversation.
Well, that makes sense. Could you run us through exactly what the story's about?
Sure. So I've always had a fascination with theology in general, both the moral implications and the mythological implications. And so I really, I've always focused on mythology from all different cultures. I'm a Native American Buddhist, so my life's a little strange anyway. But my dad's he's a pastor, born again Christian. And I was raised with my grandfather, who is a Jehovah's Witness. So I've had a lot of that cross-cultural experience when it comes to both ethnicities and religious experiences. And so I like what a lot of the religions will give you a piece of a story that you won't get almost anywhere else. But then at the same time, you'll also get these themes that are continuous, that are constant. The Savior, the flood. There's always these little things that seem to weave in and out or go through them. And so it was that was really inspiring. I wanted to look at things like Dante's Inferno, like all the way through. So 500-year-old literature, all the way up to like Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman's Good Omen. Good Omens was kind of another inspiring thing. But basically, what it is it's a modern retelling of Dante's Inferno, but with a very satirical look and kind of a pop culture spin. Background in general is I've done a lot of things in my life. I've been through a lot of things. And so I kind of have an old soul in a lot of ways. And so there's a lot of references in my book to things that are both current topics and past topics, taboos that are current and taboos that are past. And because of my characters' age ranges and the lives that they live in different time periods, you get a lot of that. You get things that people who know World War II would find funny, and people who know pop culture right now would find funny. So my two biggest genres or two biggest focuses were on current, well, I guess 80s and 90s popular music. So you have Michael Jackson, you have a lot of the references to the older Barry White, and then you've got references all the way back to the Rat Pack with using them as kind of an analog for the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
Wow, that sounds very interesting, actually. I love the updated tales and how you approach things. I notice you have a female character that's a lead, and I know a lot of male creators sometimes talk about finding it hard to write a female. Did you find yourself having any troubles writing the female role?
Well, okay, this is going to be a little odd. I know a lot of writers will say this, but no, actually, I'm pretty much in love with my female character. Evelyn is, and I don't tell many people this, but I might as well tell you guys, each one of my main characters, the three main characters in this book, they're pretty solid facets of me at different times in my life, different aspects of me. And so Evelyn is kind of the living embodiment of lust. She's a very, very strong female who comes from a very, very damaged background. And she doesn't really is for anything. Full creature, but she's not slutty. She just absolutely knows that this is a gift she has and she's going to use it. And the relationships that she builds through the story are very non-sexual, and that's why it's so different for her. She's never experienced that before. And so basically she is a succubus. And she ends up meeting my main character, Kayan, who's pretty darn pure. I mean, he's not a truly good character, evil character. He's middle of the road, but he's very human, very grounded. And that's something that she's never experienced either in her life in hell or her life when she was alive. And so to see a truly good person that, says thank you and please and is just a genuine nice guy, she actually falls in love with that more than she falls in love with a physicality or an aspect. And that's something that she's never had. So it's really writing her was very it let me tap into parts of my body or background that were more into the sexual psychology, and then on top of that, it gave me a little bit more of the, how do you take a character that is kind of overdone with a lot of the modern television shows that are on where, they over-sexualize a lot of the characters just for the sake of doing it, and really give them a voice and a healthy relationship for once.
Well, you seem to have put a lot of energy and effort and yourself into the book. We were talking before we went live about the fact that the experience of selling online versus selling it to a person in front of you. Can you go through which one you like and more, and why that particular way of selling is better for you?
Sure. So I mean, yes, I sell online. I definitely don't count on it as a revenue stream. I never have. But what I really like to do is I like to sell it face to face. I like to go to, I did Wizard World Portland up here in February, and that was my first real. The book itself released in November, and so to be able to go through and say, I don't have any reason why you should pay attention to me other than the fact that here I wrote this book. Um, you don't know me from anyone else, but to be able to sit there and have a person come up and they just like the cover, or they like the title or whatever, or they walk by and they just lift up the book, and to be able to just sit there and oh yeah, come on over to this booth, let me talk to you a bit, while you're waiting for a signing, and just kind of getting a feel for what different types of people found it interesting. That's really what I like. I like to listen to why they want to read it as much as why I wrote it. And so online, I mean, I can, you get a description of the book, you get these 150 words and 500 word descriptions of things, and yes, you get to see a cover or read a chapter here and there, but nothing really will get you. I mean, I guess this is more for the writers out there. You can't get people excited about something. You can get them interested, but not excited about something unless you're present for it. You've got to be able to really pump it into them that, this is a part of your soul and you're giving it to them. It's there. You couldn't do this without them. I could write this book and I could publish it and I could do anything I wanted because, I have the power to do so. But if I didn't do it so that someone else could read it, I wouldn't have worried about publishing it. I wanted people to be able to read it and enjoy it and see what it was. And I wanted to connect with those people and see what kind of people also thought that way. And so I really was surprised because I sold the book to an 11-year-old and her father, and then I sold it to a 65-year-old retired retiree, and then I sold it to some lady who travels up by plane all the time, so she bought the ebook, and just to be able to kind of listen to these people's lives and why they were interested in it. A lot of people were like, oh, well, I really like Dante's Inferno, or I really like Neil Gaiman, or I really like Terry Pratchett. I had some younger kids. Oh yeah, they really like Rick Riordan, and those are all people who I've read enough to where I enjoy their style, but I didn't want to tell their type of story. I told the story based a little bit more on my background. Like I said, I was Native American. I'm Navajo, and so a lot of my family, when they tell stories, it goes back to oral tradition. They like to tell stories as an experience. And so when I wrote it, I specifically wrote it in a writing style that was more like than reading a story. And so there's a lot of back and forth between the characters, and there's a lot of sentence structure that was intentionally made improper because that's how, as a storyteller, I would tell it, because this run-on sentence was important. I wanted it to be a run-on sentence. And so to try to shop that around to an average editor, it would have killed them. They would have hated me and thrown things at me. And I understand why they feel that way, but it was very important that I be able to tell this way. And I think as a whole, it's been really well received by the people who have bought it and read it because they really enjoyed it. They said it was a fast read because of that. As they all want to know when my sequel is coming out. And I'm working on it, I promise.
Speaking of the sequel, I know you said that you're working on it. Do you find, and I find this a lot, especially with people I talk to who write novels, not necessarily comic books, because when you're doing a comic book, you kind of have an idea of like where you want the story to go for 6 issues, and you have time to think about what's going next. But with a novel, you have to come up with a whole story. Is there pressure now to kind of like up the games from the first book?
Yeah, so it was funny because Comedic Divinity Fateless was never intended to be a series. But like I said, I kind of fell in love with my characters. And I wanted to tell more than just Judeo-Christian mythology. My background primarily was in Asian mythology, so Chinese, Japanese, Korean. And so I wanted to really kind of go into that aspect, but I didn't want to write a whole new set of characters because, you know, I enjoyed these characters. I worked real hard to develop them. And so there was a really natural way for me to fit in my sequel. And as I was writing the sequel, an ongoing series kind of sparked to my mind where it would be very easy to fill those in and add a book here and there but I wanted the books to be standalone, and they are. But the sequel is actually, I'm hoping it'll be done by September. It's actually still Comedic Divinity, but it's Comedic Divinity, Chaos, Curses, and Cleavage.
What an interesting title. Where could we see you next? Do you have any particular stops on this year on the road to Comic-Cons to the end of the year? Is there?
You know, I've got. I'm hoping to be able to get down to Sacramento to do their Wizard World here in June. I'm also looking at trying to do a couple shows up here locally in Portland. But if, you know, I mean, if people go onto to either my Instagram or my Twitter, you know, I'll post them as soon as I possibly know what's going on with things and the dates. They can also follow me on Facebook. I have a Facebook page, www.facebook.com/jserrano, all one word. And yeah, it's going to happen. But at the same time, I also have to be able to write a sequel. So I'm trying to balance it. That's right now being the hardest thing for me.
Well, for those people who are watching our video, you're on Amazon right now and easily accessible both on Kindle and paperback. Is there anywhere else they could purchase your book, or is Amazon the best place to go?
Booklocker.com, who's actually the publisher, they can do it through them. I have no real loyalty to that publisher specifically, and the only reason I say that is because they actually charge a very large shipping fee. Whereas Amazon, for the most part, it's free. So I would recommend, if you're going to buy it, yes, I make more money on the other site, but if you can get free shipping, by all means, get free shipping. The last thing I did want to mention on this is that I do write this book. 5% of all of my proceeds are donated to ALS.org. My stepfather, who I dedicated the book to, was diagnosed with ALS. And so part of the real driving force behind getting this book published and out there was to dedicate it to him and have him be able to read it before he turned downhill too fast.
Did he get that opportunity to read it?
He is reading it, and he's actually plateaued a little bit, so I'm hoping he'll even be able to read the sequel.
Oh, well, that's great to hear. And at this time, I think this is a great, you got to end on that with some great news like that. So we're going to thank you for being on, and to everyone who's watching this and who's heard us out, I definitely suggest going to Amazon and picking this up, because BookLocker sounds like it'll charge you a little bit more. We'll have the links on our site as soon as we post this, which should be up tonight. I want to thank our guests for showing up tonight and giving us a very interesting book to read. So that's it, guys. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you all at the next Spoken SiNs.
Thank you very much, Rob.
You're welcome.